Good morning and welcome to Wake Up. How are you all doing? Good morning, grand rising to each and every person out there. It is Monday, the 19th of May, 2025. It's exactly 9 a.m. British summertime. And welcome to Wake Up, the show that knows karma is that extraordinary thing that happens with or without your permission. And don't you love it? I know I do. I know I do. When people think of karma, they automatically assume it's going to be a bad thing. No. You can have good karma too. Depends how you live your life. And welcome to Wake Up. Welcome to Wake Up. What is on today's show? Our guest will be Jeff Peel, editor of The New Era. He's going to be talking about media manipulations, of which there are plenty. And Trump's new admin appears to be fixing the Epstein narrative. Starmer arson, curiouser and curiouser. And what about the BBC? Is there another predator on the prowl? It's a bit like saying, can you buy a sandwich at Greg's? Do you get my point? I think you do. We'll be having a brief update on the Sean Diddy Combs trial, plus the arrogance, the absolute arrogance of former BBC newsreader Huw Edwards. And did anybody hear that extraordinary spar between Emily Maitlis and Rupert Lowe about grooming gangs? I did. I was horrified, and I'll be commenting on it. And Israel is absolutely losing the PR battle. Sooner or later, you have to realize that no matter how many leaders you've been able to persuade, no matter how many publications you have on your side, no matter how many politicians are in your corner, the PR battle is getting lost. And also, no matter how many times you ring a Eurovision Song Contest line either, no matter. And what about the orca whales? Have you seen that extraordinarily sad video? I did, and I'm going to be sharing it with you. And also, I'll be sharing what one MP had to say to his constituent about geoengineering. Plus, the usual good stuff, viewer emails and live chat. We do news different around here, and you know why, don't you? Because someone had to. How are you all today? Good morning, synchronized souls, and Shin and Chris and Cara and Emma and Cheryl and Paul and Greg and Stephen. How are you all? John from Coventry, grand risings. Colin, how are you? Good day, pirates, says Esoteric Knight of Malta. And the Blue Nomad and Marcuson, because we are all ace. We are indeed. And talking about Marcuson, happy late birthday to our dear Marcuson. Gone to the beach. That was last week. And happy late birthday to you, dear Marcuson. In the Poulton household, we try to have at least a birthday week and preferably a birthday month. So happy birthday to you, darling. And in your honor, of course,
Grand rising, let's see what's new. It's the time of day for Sonia and crew. Good morning, Grand Risings.
Monday, folks. Let's get to it. Let us get to it. You're very welcome, Poppet. You're very welcome. Good morning, all. Good morning to you all. We've heard, of course, that Joe Biden has been diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer. It gives me no joy to say that line. No joy whatsoever. But I don't get it when people who have spent every last bit of their energy hating him and now suddenly it's all about respect. That's really weird to me. Really weird. And I don't suddenly respect someone because they are ill or close to passing. Do you? Is that a particular thing that you do? I don't. And what is Donald Trump trying to tell everybody? What's going on? All roads lead to Obama. And why is he doing all that Q stuff? Definitely Trump appears to be doing all the Q stuff. I don't know a great deal about Q. I've never really followed it, but I'm sure that we have some people in the comments who can tell me more. Good morning, Brett. How are you? And Teresa and Hoax. How are you all? And Drumstick and Em and Jackie. How are you all? And some of my friends said to me, talk about the frazzle drip, talk about Pizzagate. And I pointed out that I did a video on Pizzagate and YouTube took it down. They took it down. We're shocked, aren't we? I know we're shocked. And what else is going on that I want to say at the top of this hour? Well, first, just got to say this. Thank you to the extraordinary response to this. The emails, the comments, the messages, great response to Friday's investigation. It got me thinking, there is still more to cover. There is, I said at the end of that investigation on Friday, this is going to probably set off a chain of events for me in which it will make me think about more things. And of course it did. And you wrote to me, many of you wrote to me. I'm going to read out some of your messages because it's just been actually overwhelmingly beautiful, really beautiful. And so I'm definitely going to be following this. I will probably incorporate it within a wake-up show as opposed to a separate investigation. But I want to look at the involvement of the music industry and the business and how it impacted him, and whether there were other avenues that may lead me to problematic destinations to explore in the death of George Michael. Absolute credit, of course, to brilliant Graham, who not only suggested it but gave me so many leads. I was spoilt for choice. You are a star. Thank you. I will put the link in the description after the stream. I think what Murdoch's press and other tabloid scum who came for George failed to realize is how loved he was. The man was loved, right? Your emails and comments have blown me away. Here's some responses. Rocky Mountain Eye said in the comments, all of this information is much different than what we in the US were told about his death. It was reported here that he was found in his home. True. 2 weeks after he had passed away. Not true. He was found practically immediately, so we were told. We never heard about his hospitalizations. Interesting. I was a fan of his in the 90s. He was a great talent. Rest in peace, George. Indeed. And what else? Neil Harvey, regular viewer. Good morning to you, Neil. Said you mentioned a few great songs by George. I was hoping you would also refer to his performance of Somebody to Love at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. There's so many great George Michael songs, Neil. Honestly, so many, including Waiting for the Day. There's just like so many. And but I take your point absolutely. And what was lovely was that after Neil had watched that, he said, yesterday evening, you inspired me to watch George and the remaining members of Queen at the tribute concert once more, which inevitably led to them to then watching Queen perform the song in Montreal in 1981. Wonderful and inspiring musical memories. Indeed. And I thought this was really interesting. Email from G, who doesn't want me to reveal their name. Good morning to you. Said, hi, Sonia, back in late 2016. Ironically, a few days after George's death, I was rushed to hospital with respiratory failure and was put into an induced coma and had an emergency tracheotomy, which later developed into sepsis and a complete shutdown of all my vital organs. The culprit turned out to be flu and pneumonia. I just want to address that when George Michael was recorded with similar symptoms and a statement was released saying he had flu after being in an induced coma and had a tracheotomy, that it was very possibly true, as I had suffered a similar fate, although I was hospitalized for several months, and I'm not sure that matches George Michael's experience. And G goes on to say, to be clear, I am not stating you are wrong. Given his lifestyle, he may well have suffered from HIV and was in an induced coma because of it. I'm just highlighting the possibility that the statement they made may well have been true. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. All intelligence is important to this, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Sarah said very simply, I loved George Michael, and I have never believed what we were told about his death. Thank you for highlighting this. Justice for George Michael. And I think that was kind of like all around what people were thinking. I don't know what's going on in the chat, but I won't tolerate much. Everybody knows I am not going to tolerate much at all. I'm just doing a quick scan of the chat. Right. I see here. Look at this. So you see, we get some nasty stuff in here. The great thing about me being in charge is I can immediately ban people. You keep my daughter's name or my daughter out of your mouth, as Jackie says, right? Be very clear, right? Be very clear. Right. Let us move on. Come on, give us news, says Hamish. And right, Starmer, European Defence Fund. And also, can we just be very, very clear, kids, that I do everything on my own time around here. And if you don't like it, there are a zillion other videos to watch. Are we clear about that? Good. Starmer, interesting. Starmer, European Defence Fund. The EU and UK are set to sign a broad defence and security pact at a summit today. Well, this is going to be interesting. But of course, we're no longer in Europe as such, right? So we, the UK, must pay to join the EU Defence Fund. They're literally taking us back into the EU by the back door. You do realise this, right? Draft terms require non-EU nations to negotiate agreements before their defence industries can get access to detailed agreements, which will be required before companies such as BAE Systems can win contracts funded by the Security Action for Europe Fund. And so, in other words, it is looking increasingly likely that the UK is now going to have to pay 150 billion euros in order to be able to purchase weapons from this fund, right? These are plans which are currently being discussed by diplomats in Brussels. The pact is a non-binding instrument, we're told. The more difficult hurdle is going to be a bilateral agreement that would include a financial contribution. A financial contribution. Who wants to? I literally don't get it, right? I didn't actually vote to leave the EU, right? But many, many people did. And we had a Brexit. And the point is we shouldn't be re-entering by the back door and paying 150 billion euros to do it. Absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And Starmer has a lot on his mind at the moment, and not just EU negotiations, lots of talk about him online and in media offices. Sooner or later, these people are going to have to address the endless and ongoing rumours about the British Prime Minister, and there are very many. Isabel Oakeshott, Richard Tice's partner, first mentioned Starmer's private life and secrets, according to her, I think on talk radio. And that was some months back now. And it's been ongoing. There's been lots of rumours and gossip about Keir Starmer. We've heard lots and lots about it. I'm not going to be talking about it here because I understand defamation laws, but I do think that it's actually reached a critical point now where there's so much said on social media. There's so much being said in newsrooms. There's so much being said in newspapers if you read between the lines, that something's going to have to be addressed, no doubt about it. And which brings me to a 21-year-old Ukrainian national who has been charged with arson of properties and a car linked to the Prime Minister. Here he is, Roman Lavrynovych. He's 21, who the BBC, not the BBC, what am I saying the BBC is because I want to talk about Huw Edwards in a minute. We're told he's a builder, a roofer. He's accused of 3 counts of arson with intent to endanger life following fires at locations in North London. He appeared in court on Friday. He was arrested at an address in Sydenham in the early hours of Tuesday. He was charged on Thursday and he appeared in court on Friday. He did not enter any plea to the charges. He was assisted by an interpreter. He spoke only to confirm his name, date of birth and address at a short hearing. And obviously live case, so we have to be incredibly careful. But details, as far as I can ascertain, and that are in the public domain now, is that the Met Police's Counter-Terrorism Command led the investigation because of the connections to a high-profile public figure. And that high-profile public figure was Keir Starmer. In the early hours of Monday last week, the emergency services responded to a fire at the Kentish town home where Keir Starmer lived before becoming Prime Minister and moving into 10 Downing Street. And I think it's understood that his sister-in-law lives there. And police were... there was also damage was caused to the property's entrance, rather. And then 4 days earlier, on 8th of May, a car that Sir Keir sold to a neighbour last year was set alight on the same street. And then further in the early hours of Sunday, firefighters dealt with another small fire at the front door of a house converted into flats in nearby Islington, which is also linked to the Prime Minister. So obviously it's very curious that all of these alleged arson attacks appear to be linked in some way to the British Prime Minister. And not one British newspaper appears to be asking questions about this. Of course, it's difficult too. It's a live case, as we say. So we have to be very, very careful. And I'm going to be careful and I'm going to move on. But enough just to have acknowledged that. I want to talk about these people. The Huw Edwards dossier. And so what we now know, without a shadow of a doubt, is there were other complaints about Huw Edwards before he was eventually convicted. And an FOI filed by the Sunday Times, and you've got to bear in mind, the Sunday Times, although owned by Rupert Murdoch, is not actually doing a public service there. The Sunday Times and Rupert Murdoch hate the BBC. I hate the BBC. So there we have a mutual enemy. And difficult to tell whether I hate the BBC more than I hate Rupert Murdoch. Might be a, kind of like, and difficult to tell that. But bottom line is this, that the Sunday Times, through Freedom of Information requests, have ascertained some quite interesting information. And that is an hour before Huw Edwards was sentenced on the 16th of September last year for making child abuse images. BBC Director General Tim Davie, who's in the bottom picture, received an email which warned that a complaint was made about Huw Edwards as far back as 2012. And of course, nothing was done about it. These are the emails. I don't know if you can, probably can't see them very well there, but and the emails are clearly from somebody who had some influence at the BBC, because within 3 minutes of Tim Davie, big boss at BBC, receiving this, he responded. And so here's what's interesting, of course, is that the email came from a former BBC employee who said he wished to personally and potentially flag an area of risk to the corporation that you may not be previously aware of. And it said that the complaint had been made against Huw Edwards, adding, the reason for my email to you is just to flag that there is a high probability that this complaint was documented somewhere, but was by recollection to have been deemed non-actionable. Interesting. The ex-employee stressed that this was not necessarily a criminal allegation, and I have no real specifics I can offer you other than it exists. Well, see, now here's the thing. That was significant enough and came from a substantial enough source, as I say, that Tim Davie replied 3 minutes later, confirming he would share it with the team investigating past allegations regarding Huw Edwards. And the reality is that there were other complaints made, but it goes on. He was added to this thing called a C list, which is a spreadsheet of allegations. No, the email had said to Mr. Davie that the complaint was most likely under the so-called C list, if it's anywhere. So the C list is their spreadsheet that they had of allegations against BBC stars that was created after Savile. Imagine being an organization that needs to create a spreadsheet of predators, of alleged predators. You're screwed, right? You're screwed. And Savile, of course, was the BBC's long-term asset, and his crimes were exposed a year after his death. How very bloody convenient. The instant log, the C list, was put together by the BBC Human Resources team, and it separated complaints into categories: A, for high-risk allegations involving sexual assault or other criminality; B, for former high-risk cases where police were not able to take them forward, so they would be handled internally; and C, for non-high-risk actions. The C list involved cases that were not necessarily criminal, as you can tell, but included allegations of bullying and harassment. And the thing is that the BBC has literally a history of this stuff. And what's also interesting was, as part of those revelations with the Sunday Times, is that Huw Edwards has agreed to pay back part of his salary, big whoop, which apparently he still hasn't done. And Edwards is a filthy predator who deserves to be shunned from public life. But predators frequently know other predators. So Huw Edwards, in a communication between his conviction and his sentencing last year, sent a communication to Deborah Furness, the head of BBC News, and told her about a serious allegation, right? So, as I say, Edwards is a filthy predator, but the thing about predators is that they generally know other predators. So what is that serious allegation? When it comes to the BBC, I think we can all guess, right? And who knows what is really happening? What is really happening? And we know that the BBC has still not received a penny of Edward's salary. And Debbie Furness responded saying, your email makes a very serious allegation, and so I have made colleagues aware of it. If you have emails in your possession that raise issues that you are concerned about, I would urge you to share them with us so we can look into it. While you believe that you are drawing an evident risk to my attention, I do find it surprising that you should think it appropriate to do so in the form that you have. What, in an email that can be traced? Because the thing is, once Huw Edwards was out of the BBC, he had no longer had any loyalties. So he knew exactly the protocol. He knew that emails be traced. But she seems to be scolding him about this. And also bear in mind that predators are also opportunistic, right? So even he was angry. The BBC had not stood by him, and why ever should they? They'd be dumb to. Because they can't afford another predator on their hands, even though, we know it's a hornet's nest of predators over there. And so what's happened with this individual? Well, there is suggestions that this individual has been suspended, but we don't know anymore. So I don't know. All I know is that it appears to me that the BBC, apart from the fact that we must defund the BBC, it's ridiculous and ludicrous and obscene that it's still funded by people. Absolutely ridiculous. But the fact is that the BBC has once again, it would appear, been warned about something that is a risk, that is a problem. And their response is, why have you told me in this manner? Isn't that just typical crap from them? It's astonishing. Grand risings to you, Darren. The BBC is full of them, says Stephen. Indeed. Sally Ann says suspended on full pay. ? Very probably. Just like Huw Edwards was, darling. Just like Huw Edwards was. Right. What to tell you? Well, of course, I cannot get through this morning without commenting on this extraordinary interview that FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino have given an interview to Fox News, right? And let's play it, shall we? Let me bring it in. Do you know, the thing is, obviously, these people, they were selected because they were huge MAGA favourites. Dan Bongino, former podcaster, given an incredible role. And honestly, I think everybody was expecting too much from these people. But have a listen to what they had to say, if you've not already heard it.
Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
I know it's hard.
So these people just expect us to take their word. Listen, I'm not part of the MAGA cult, yeah? So I don't just take anybody's word for it. And there are many people already trying to justify what they've said. The bottom line is this. I do not believe, not for one single second, that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. And I don't believe that the two men on that screen believe that either. Right? This is what happens when you get into government. And the reality is that Jeffrey Epstein and what he did is rather too close to their boss. Donald Trump spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein, right? They partied together. They were two men on the kind of New York club scene, very moneyed, influential. And I think what will eventually happen is that all of these kind of MAGA influencers who are supposed to be about truth and clearly aren't, they're about public relations. I think eventually they will prove to be an excellent case study. Excellent. How quickly a MAGA influencer can turn when they've been given a bit of power and the job of protecting their boss at all costs. I watched that interview and I felt a sense of sickness in the pit of my stomach. And I just thought how easy it has been to fool people, literally, because these people were, I'm pretty sure Dan has said repeatedly that Epstein did not kill himself. And yet suddenly he's given a position within Trump's administration. And yes, he's seen the files. So what? Don't believe you. Don't believe any of you. Simple as. Derek says Epstein is still alive. Well, that's a school of thought too. And the first person that I had to kick out was to do with this, Israel. Don't come on here making accusations against me or against my family, right? I'll kick you out. I'll literally kick you out. And also, you're a coward. You're a coward. You never come up to me in the street and say that. So it's about Israel. What a busy time for Israel. And it partly puts me in a difficult position where you have to decide which competing interest wins. And I say that because I mentioned Ben and Jerry ice cream last week and their attempts to interfere with British justice by backing a challenge against the Supreme Court ruling that woman is a biological term that does not apply to men. Well, they've now thrown me. They've now actually thrown me. Here is Ben Cohen, where the name Ben comes from. And here he is He was charged with crowding and obstructing others after he was arrested while protesting against the Gaza blockade during a US Senate hearing. Cohen is the Ben in Ben & Jerry's, as I say. He made his stand on Wednesday while Robert F. Kennedy was addressing a hearing. And Cohen just said, he stood up and he talked about the starving children and the Gaza blockades. And it was quite phenomenal, actually. And so I have to wonder, when you get a situation like this, right? I don't like Ben & Jerry's stance on the trans issue, but I do like their stance on Israel. What do you do? What do you do? And this is where the whole purity spiral comes in, of course, isn't it? Because which competing interest wins? And I have to say, for me, the competing interest that wins on this occasion has to be Israel. Has to be Israel, because we are talking about masses of murdered and innocent children and women, masses. And the same is not for trans. Trans is an ideology which is appalling. But when it comes to a competing interest, I have to say that this one wins. This one wins. And I've had a similar situation with the Co-op recently, oddly, who not only have empty shelves, which I've shown you. I've been in there and looked around, Fulham being hacked. And I've also had problems with them because they sell these awful things, the heinous Franken chickens, how these poor animals have no life at all before they're killed. Listen, I don't eat animals, but the very least we can do is give them some kind of life beforehand. And Co-op weren't doing that, and they're in a lot of trouble. But then on top of that, and again, competing interests, Co-op have this weekend voted to end all trading with Israel at its annual general meeting. In the motion, members called on the Co-op's management to show moral courage and leadership by taking all Israeli products off the shelves. This is a historic moment. Co-op is one of the UK's biggest supermarket chains. And I think that this is quite a phenomenal statement to make. And a question: what was very unfunny comedian Jimmy Carr, Nigel Farage, Maria Eagle, the Board of Deputies, and Kemi Badenoch all doing at a secret Israeli Independence Day celebration at the British Museum last week? And why was it so secret? And why did the museum lie to its staff and hide the event? And why were the Metropolitan Police set on protesters who knew about the event? Why? Tell me why. And also, we all know the whole thing with Eurovision is a crock, right? I think, didn't the UK get 0 points again? I mean, it's political, obviously. And Eurovision was absolutely manipulated and infiltrated for a country that is not even in Europe, which is Israel. And the thing is, it was infiltrated because accordingly, kind of like top of the viewers' votes came second, right? But then when you look at the reel, like the streaming of it, doesn't even feature in the top 20. The top 20 streaming on Spotify does not even feature Israel's entry. And that is because what you had were Zionists voting many, many times over. I've seen tweets where one person said, I voted 100 times. Another one said, I voted 60 times, 20 from international, 20 from UK, 20 from Australia. Yes, I have credit cards all over the place. This is what people do. Who watches that nonsense, says Darren. Indeed, it's a pile of crock, isn't it? It's a pile of crock. Before we bring in Jeff, briefly want to mention Dr. Asim Malhotra, British consultant cardiologist, has been appointed as an advisor to US President Donald Trump's Make America Healthy Again movement. Not as the Daily Mail headline read that he was head of the movement. That would be RFK Jr. And I did support Dr. Asim Malhotra years ago over his work to do with big food and statins, way before he became known during C19. But the fact is, he was utterly remiss over C19. It would be ridiculous to forget that. Absolutely ridiculous. At the height of C19, he appeared on Good Morning Britain and talking about, we need to understand where vaccine hesitancy is coming from. Let me just see if I can bring in this image just to remind you. I think it's really important to reflect on people's former positions, right? They may well have changed and people should be allowed to change, but I don't believe for a second that people should be hailed as heroes when they were far from it. But the reality is, at the height of it, he appeared on probably one of the very worst shows for propaganda to do with C-19. And he talked about vaccine hesitancy. And he said that there is irrational reasoning why people don't want to take the vaccine, which is based on blatant false information circling on social media. That would be the very same people that you are now enjoying the support from, Asim, right? So I think he admitted that he was wrong. He made this claim that his father was impacted by the jab. All those things are absolutely great, but I still don't want anybody, especially a doctor who I'm a journalist. I'm not a doctor. Yet I knew from the get-go there was a problem with rushed experimental jabs. So when a doctor or a nurse, e.g. John Campbell, they claim not to have known and they were following the science, I struggle to trust them later on. That said, if Asim Malhotra can influence America to get rid of the jabs and then have that transfer over to the UK, fully in support of it. But we cannot forget who is who in this. And I interviewed Cheryl Granger last week, formerly of UK Column, long form interview, which I will put on Rumble when I have chance, and I'll try and do an edit for this Friday. And she is talking about the jabs and pregnant women and really serious stuff that is known and how they were let down. And the big problem with Asim being a promoter and now a skeptic is it's hard for anyone to trust people like that. It really is. Same with somebody like Andrew Bridgen. But here's my thing. Can these people rectify the damage? Well, they can't rectify the damage of what they've already done. You can't do that. There may well be people who are dead as a consequence of taking their advice. So all they can do now is they must make good, and they must make exceptionally good. You know, he's making lots of noises and people and newspapers are claiming he will ban C-19 in America, but will he really? Does he really have that power? The one thing that I used to support him. He's in my film, The Business of Cancer. He did loads of great stuff to do with kind of like big food and statins. Great work. He has an ego the size of Mars. Some people will say that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's enabled him to push himself forward. But you know, I'm always very skeptical and cynical about situations like this when people do not just a 180, but then want to lead the movement. That is often problematic for me, but we shall see. Jury is out for me right now. May he go forth and prosper in a way that he failed to do previously on this particular subject. Right. I want to bring in my guest, Jeff Peel. I have one guest today, only one guest today, and for a number of reasons. And that is the aim is not to have a 2-hour show today, although we shall see how that develops. I've got some issues with my throat, so I need to heal it. But let's bring in our first and only guest. He's Jeff Peel. He's the editor of The New Era. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great, Sonia. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Jeff.
Apart from your sore throat, obviously.
Oh, God, I don't know what's going on. Let me just have a slug of warm lemon water. Right. Okay. So how are you, Jeff? You're well, are you?
I'm very well. And, I totally agree with the comments you've just been making about Asim Malhotra. What a disappointment, really, in terms of the entire Maha movement. You know, they have essentially campaigned on one set of issues and, of course, totally capitulated when being given power. And I echo everything that you say, but also Jay Bhattacharya. You know, it turns out that Jay Bhattacharya, who obviously is his boss essentially in Maha, went to school with Peter Thiel, and they're sort of fellow technocrats. And so the entire and that even affects organizations like Brownstone Institute that were wonderful during the COVID years, but of course have now totally capitulated and are saying that these sort of revised methods of reform are up to scratch. You know, and I don't know if you saw, but Asim Malhotra appeared on Channel 4, was interviewed, and he made the statement that COVID-19 is no longer a killer. You know, in relation to the vaccine.
Was this recent? Was that
just a few days ago? And, I cannot believe this. So what they're doing is they're peddling the old COVID-19 line. They'll probably come out with some argument. Oh, it was a terrible time. We had to cut some corners in order to introduce these much needed vaccines. And of course, mistakes were made, but of course, it was all for the best end game. But of course, now we need to withdraw them from the market because we'll probably come out with a better and revised form of mRNA vaccines in due course, because we can use artificial intelligence and so on to design them. And Asim Malhotra right at the center of this nonsense, and it's so incredibly disappointing. But an object lesson in the fact that these people are all paid actors. They are there to mouth the words. They do not think. They just simply spew propaganda for the highest paying manipulator.
And of course, you're absolutely right. Of course, Jay is his boss. I said Robert F. Kennedy, but Robert F. Kennedy is overseeing the whole thing to do with health, right? But they obviously have tiers. You're absolutely right. Well, I want the best. I absolutely want the best, but we would be stupid to ignore what's already come. That's just ridiculous, right? So but thank you for that. I appreciate that. I want you to also talk about a topic that is of great interest to me and also of interest to you, and that is to do with media manipulation. And let's talk about this, kind of like the evolution of stories, why some stories are pushed more than others. Is there some sort of financial incentive in the background? Is it the same regular public figures who are involved in these things? Jeff, take it away. Start wherever you want to.
Well, I think there's two issues at play typically in terms of media manipulation. I think you had Francis O'Neill on last week, who's brilliant. You know, his Substack is a must read. Right. His most recent one is he essentially describes all mainstream journalists as sort of systematic liars, but then they've got their hired help as well. It's clear that there's two things going on. One is making lots and lots of money, and I'm sure Asim Malhotra is being extraordinarily well paid, and also people like Dr. Hilary Jones on ITV. They're clearly leading with certain storylines that are placed as a result of some type of financial inducement. You know, we know, for example, that Sky is going down the tubes because, like, they're losing money hand over fist.
Fact.
ITV are probably in a very similar situation in that they can't make money from mainstream advertising, so they have to come up with these weird and wonderful ways of making money. And by the way, the second motivation, if you like, for these storylines is compromat.
Yes.
Politicians, the civil society, you know, all of the celebrities and so on. Often there's compromising material on them, and that's how they get obedience. They're clearly being handled by intelligence services or intelligence agencies to spew certain lines. And the threat is, of course, that they will be outed by the agencies that are handling them. But in the case, I think, of ITV and Hilary Jones, it's pure financial inducement. So I tweeted, and so it's pinned to my Twitter account, a snippet from an interview that Hilary Jones did in relation to the weight loss drugs. And this seems to be a particular vein at the minute for ITV.
Well, not just ITV, Jeff.
No, not at all.
Right.
Yeah. But ITV is case in point because the Jones guy keeps being wheeled out to spin and spew the nonsense. And I've actually written down a direct quote from the clip that I have on that tweet. Okay. He says, the weight loss jabs work. And of course, there's no suggestion that they don't, or that there are any side effects. Or, you know, you would think that a doctor might actually describe some of the adverse side effects of these things. But no, the weight loss jabs work by reducing inflammation in the body. Where's the epidemiological evidence that this is the case? You know, where's the you know, and these weight loss drugs can reduce the risk of cancer by 50% more than other methods like bariatric surgery and so on, which you mentioned earlier in the interview. He's saying that 1, they work without any question. 2, they reduce inflammation in the body. And 3, they reduce your risk of cancer if you're obese much more than if you were going to do some exercise or reduce the amount of food that you eat. So it's just appalling. Now, the question is, what is the financial inducement for Hillary Jones to say these things? Well, he's a director of a company called Frontline Doctor Limited. And I presume this is a vehicle for his consultancy work. You know, I don't think he's an employee of ITV. But it raises two questions. Is his consultancy business, Frontline Doctor Limited, receiving payments from ITV? Or if it's not, is it receiving payments from, say, drug manufacturers? Now, the last time he had to report, he had £1.6 million of cash in that company, which presumably is his media consultancy business. 1.6 million of available cash at the bank. So how much is he being paid, and how much is ITV being paid to essentially sidestep the regulations in relation to advertising pharmaceutical products in the UK, which is overtly prohibited under UK law?
Wow.
Now, apparently he did this before on the Lorraine show, where he came out and made similar claims for these drugs. And supposedly, according to news reports, incensed Ofcom. You know, ITV was essentially wrapped over the knuckles. But is that the extent of it? So that he's still able to do it?
This is very serious.
How is this possible?
Very serious what you're saying here. In fact, so serious that after the show, I'm going to clip what you've just said and I'm going to send it to ITV for a response, because we need to know. So what you're essentially saying is, are these drugs being put through an editorial path rather than an advertising path because it's less problematic to promote them if it's done that way? Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yes, because there's other evidence as well that's the case. Because on the main news bulletin, the ITV news bulletin last week, the headline feature was the fact that these weight loss drugs were being administered via unauthorized people, you know, like essentially like the Avon lady would, I'm not suggesting Avon's involved, by the way, but these people would organize parties where obese people would come along and be shown how they should inject these products into their tummy muscle.
What could possibly go wrong? Oh, yeah. Dear God.
And of course, the drugs are not necessarily kosher, but of course, these drugs can be obtained quite easily. And even an unauthorized person, what are they going to say to patients that's different from a doctor? You stick the needle into your tummy and you inject this stuff, and this is the little vial. You knock all the air bubbles out, you know. But essentially, by default, you know, the ITV was essentially publicizing the benefits of the weight loss drugs by highlighting the fact that there were unauthorized practitioners. Why was that the main item in the 10 o'clock news bulletin? It was not news. It was not, you know, there was no news agenda element to it. It was essentially a public information reel that was popularizing the idea that these weight loss drugs were effective and should be used by members of the general public who were overweight and who perhaps hadn't bothered to go to their GP to get them prescribed, or perhaps weren't morbidly obese.
This is extremely alarming. I mean, it's alarming, isn't it? Because the thing is that you mentioning him, Dr. Hillary Jones, he did the exact same thing, obviously, with the C19 jabs. You know, they rarely qualified anything. It was, you must do this. This is absolutely the right thing to do. It's completely safe. No side. Like, they just went in on it. And it's the same. It appears to be the same playbook. Of course, at this moment in time, we're not making any allegations about Dr. Hillary Jones or anybody receiving payments in an untoward manner. I will be approaching ITV and finding out what they have to say about it. But I think it's interesting about this whole weight loss jab, Jeff, because it is everywhere. I mean, the thing is that and it's those things that make me think that it's an entire media campaign as opposed to just ITV. And the reason that I say that, I want to use an example, is this: Alison Pearson, Miss So-Called Free Speech. The fat jab has worked for me and it can help cure our economy. Yeah. So Hillary Jones is saying it's going to help with cancer, and she's saying it's going to help cure our economy. This very much feels like an agenda, Jeff.
It very much does. And, you know, it's clear that pharmaceutical companies have so much money to throw at these types of campaigns, you know, eye-watering amounts of money that are life-changing. 1.6 million pounds of cash in a small business, but for one individual. I'm not suggesting that this is I ran my own consultancy business,
Right.
but I went out and tendered for work. I pitched my offer, and sometimes I won the work, sometimes I didn't. But I only engaged in legitimate activity and hopefully helped my client's performance. But in this instance, if someone is appearing on national television,
Right,
and overtly promoting, and it is promoting, because he's saying that things work, and that they can only be of benefit, and they reduce cancer risk. So somebody is paying someone for those messages to be put out on mainstream television. And we're simply asking the question, is Hillary Jones being paid to do this? Who's paying him? And is ITV being paid? So that's what, and that's a classic, news agenda item, which is being popularized at this minute. And then, the other ones, of course, that are out there, you alluded to earlier, there's this weird story relating to the arson attacks and Keir Starmer. That one could well fall into the compromat domain. So, as you said, it's not making mainstream media. It's sub judice. Somebody has been charged.
yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah. So, but the only things we can refer to are in the public domain. That I think 2 people have been charged in relation. There's one guy arrested apparently at Luton Airport, another one charged actually.
Right.
Now, so what's going on here? That this particular thing is being investigated by the anti-terrorism branch. So that means that it takes it away from the mainstream, beat Bobby. So does this mean that either they're covering it up? So it is a big news story that's being covered up by an anti-terrorism unit, and therefore they can suggest to journalists who might want to dig a little bit deeper to hold off. This is a serious matter, and the terrorism guys are dealing with it. Or could it be that they're sending out a signal that they have compromat on Starmer and that Starmer has to be kept in line? I don't know, but there's lots and lots of form for senior politicians who are essentially paid actors to have a shot fired across their bows to remind them that there's a lot of compromising. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second that that's the case here, but we'd like to know. And why is it that the mainstream media is not covering this story as yet? Because there is stuff in the public domain that we have referred to, that they could refer to as well. It's just very, very strange. The other sort of category. Go on, Jeff. Yeah. And I have to call out Mary Finch. I think you're going to have Mary on your show shortly again. But she wrote a very interesting article recently about this organization called Democracy 3.0.
Yes.
Which essentially is a fundraising, a crowdfunding platform for people who are very, very much in the public domain, and it might be temporarily and relatively recently, or they're career politicians or whatever. And Democracy 3.0 seems to have been set up to sort of capture the public mood and revulsion about a certain thing that's happened and that is in the public domain and has been heavily pushed by mainstream media. And on the back of that wave of revulsion or whatever it might be, raise a bunch of money for the poor victims. But the victims often are people who are extraordinarily well-heeled, being paid a fortune. People like Lawrence Fox himself has raised crowdfunding campaigns for legal actions on Democracy 3.0. Dan Wootton, Lucy Connolly, the person who apparently has been jailed unfairly because of a tweet. And even the Spectator newspaper has been suggesting that the judge in that particular case is a bit of an odd character. There's no back history to where the judge came from, who doled out this terrible, terrible sentence for this woman because of an offensive tweet. So, but of course, Jeremy Hosking, who is a funder of the Reform Party, is one of the founders of Democracy 3.0.
Reform or Reclaim?
Both.
Oh. Is he really? Interesting. Okay, got you.
Well, he's just to clarify, he's a major funder of Reclaim, a mate of Lawrence Fox. He employs essentially Lawrence Fox and pays him his vast fees annually to essentially engage in a bunch of high-profile media campaigns, aided and abetted by, the usual suspect media organizations.
Yeah.
But I think he's funded the Reform Party to the tune of 2.7 million or something over the last few years.
Interesting.
And he's previously been a funder of the Conservative Party. Also runs a hedge fund.
Around.
And has invested heavily in the usual suspect sectors. So again, and runs the Critic magazine, which again is a vehicle for particular media campaigns as well, particularly of the so-called right. So there does seem to be money compromat type activities and placed paid advertorial going on, and this essentially represents the totality of the media. As Francis O'Neill says, they're systematic liars. How could we believe any of this deluge of nonsense that comes out of our mainstream media any longer? None of them have any credibility. They haven't had any credibility for decades. They didn't raise any questions about 9/11. They didn't raise any questions about COVID. They didn't raise any questions about the bank bailouts. Right. They didn't raise any questions about the fact that the UK government is now buying billions and billions of dollars of UK treasuries because the Americans can't sell treasury stock to anybody, apparently, apart from the Fed and the UK government. They do nothing. They raise no issues. They uncover nothing. And it's left, frankly, to people like you, Sonia, to raise these questions and say, why is it that our civil society has been hijacked by a bunch of manipulators, crooks, thieves, and liars?
I mean, there's not much I can add to that, Jeff. I mean, I left mainstream media for a reason. I refuse every invitation. I still get invitations. I will not be part of it because I will not prop it up anymore. Once I realized, and I was out the door, and I didn't want to give any more of my energy to it. But I think that it's interesting you brought up the whole Lucy Connolly thing. I was actually going to touch on that, and I will still briefly after this, because you're right. I'm going to bring on Miri on Friday to talk about it and the kind of potential psychological operations at play there. And of course, vast crowdfunder now for Lucy Connolly. And there is lots of crowdfunding going on at the moment, of course. And again, very interesting that you talk about the type of people who've had funds raised for. I think also Dan Wootton, one of my least favorite tabloid hacks ever. And again, another one who managed to inveigle his way into the so-called freedom movement as if he's part of the freedom movement. But listen, Jeff, before you leave us, what are you up to this week? What's on your table? Anything interesting?
Well, I've been, as I mentioned to you, I think a DM on Twitter, I've been writing a book over the last several months, and I'm pretty much full on with that at the minute. So I'm trying to get a draft finished to get to my wonderful editor, who has promised to turn it around as quickly as possible. But I'm hoping to publish later in the year. It's a novel because obviously with some of the things I want to say, if I referred to the actual people that I've come across, as you have come across over the last few years, I'd probably be sued for libel and so on. So I've had to turn it into a novel format, but it addresses some of the things that we have been discussing here. So I'm at 70,000 words at the minute, so I'm hoping to get it sort of finished around sort of June, July time. So I'm going to be focused on that this week. I was away in Greece over the last few weeks and didn't really put in as much effort as I should have. So that's my focus for this week and the coming weeks, to try to get that done and dusted. But I'll publish details of it in the next few weeks on the New Era. So any of my subscribers or Twitter followers, I'll maybe put up a booking form or something so I can tell you when the thing is published.
do that, because one of my favorite things about these fictional books is working out who's who. And but we have to fictionalize these things, obviously, because some things you simply can't say because of defamation laws. But I do love those moments when I'm like, that's who that is. So I look forward to that. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, everybody. Jeff Peel, editor of New Era. Looking forward to that new book, Jeff. Take good care of yourself. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you very much indeed,
Thank
Sonia.
you.
All the best.
Brilliant. Thank you. You too. Wonderful. Wonderful to have Jeff with us. And just to refer briefly to that Democracy 3. Yes, Miri Finch, she's done loads of work into Democracy 3. And I think it's a very interesting setup, and we're going to be looking into it and looking at potentially who is making money from it, from these crowdfunders. And we shall see. But Jeff referred briefly to Lawrence Fox. Lawrence Fox ended up having to delete his own crowdfunder on his, well, I don't know if Democracy 3 is his crowdfunding website, but it's certainly one that he uses. But I noted this weekend, let me just find it. Yeah, Lawrence Fox set up his own crowdfunder. I think this is to do with his charges regarding ULEZ, where he's accused of encouraging damage to ULEZ cameras. And he set it up, raised £5, and that was the last thing that anybody saw. And then he deleted the page. He ain't as popular as he thinks. And I would not give a penny to that man. Anybody who does blackface on their kids and posts it online is not somebody I would give a penny to, ever. And I think the interesting thing about Democracy 3, and that is when campaign funds exceed £10,000, Democracy 3 will deduct 7% from the total raised. So if you are giving money to that Lucy Connolly crowdfunder, Lucy Connolly, of course, she's a Tory, former Tory councillor's wife who was imprisoned, a so-called free speech issue. But the more I look into it, the more questionable it becomes. I'm sort of starting to veer towards the whole idea. This is a psychological operation being waged on us. Now, when you talk about a psychological operation, people think that it's been made up. Not necessarily. Every aspect of it could be legit, but it could be being used as a psychological operation against us, warfare, a chilling effect. I think it's very interesting that Keir Starmer came in, a former director of public prosecutions. His job was to prosecute people, although not the kind of people we wanted prosecuted. His job was to prosecute people. And he's come in as this very, very punishing PM who, after the Southport atrocity, where Axel Ruda-Cabana killed 3 little girls and injured others, Keir Starmer came out and attacked the people who were raising questions about it, attacked those noticing the problem. That's what he did. He deemed people as far right, which has now since been proven in a police investigation, the police report, that was not the case. It was not, far right factions who were motivating or driving the anger on the street. It was people like me who are as unfar right as you can humanly get. Right. So, but it's interesting to me that Keir Starmer came in extremely punishing. This incredible chilling effect has been put all over social media. And certainly in cases like Lucy Connolly, that scared the life out of people. And, I've said this before, and that is Lucy Connolly and I would have almost nothing in common, nothing at all. The tweet that she wrote was abhorrent to me. It gave me an insight into her mind, which I found ugly. I don't like people like that. It's not my gig. But I felt that it was a complete extreme overreaction on her. She was sentenced to 31 months. As Jeff alluded to, people are questioning about the judge, Melbourne Inman KC, which I think it's the Spectators even saying that one quote was, "I've consulted 24 sources and can find nothing substantial whatsoever about this judge." Not his legal scholarship, not even where he was born, which is extraordinary for such a high profile case. So who knows? Who knows, kids? Who knows? And moving on. Did anybody see this? There are appalling interviews. And then there's this. Emily Maitlis, of course, probably became most famous for the Prince Andrew interview, which I thought was exceptional. I thought was very, very well done. It's been immortalized in 2 TV drama documentaries, on Netflix and on Amazon. It's done very well financially. Everybody involved has done very, very nicely out of it, from the Booker Sam to Emily Maitlis, right? But she's now part of this kind of podcast called, I think it's The News Agents, and she had Rupert Lowe on with her, and she clearly defamed him. I mean, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't agree with Rupert Lowe about, but I do think that he's actually attempting to work in the public interest, which is not what can be said about a lot of politicians. Rupert Lowe, of course, recently he was investigated by the Metropolitan Police, and then that was all closed down. And he says that the law has been weaponized against him because he dared to criticize Nigel Farage. And what happened was Emily Maitlis interviewed Rupert Lowe, and the issue of grooming gangs came up. And she accused Rupert Lowe of not only making money out of the crowdfunded inquiry that he set up, but also, I'm going to quote her directly, right? She said, she challenged him to say that all grooming is bad, to which he promptly agreed, adding that all rape was bad, right? And did she think he wouldn't, though? Did she think he wouldn't? She was doing the whole thing of, she actually called him a racist. She said he was interested in this subject. I've got the direct quote. She said, because probably you are racist and you don't believe there are white perpetrators, which she said repeatedly, right? And I mean, he tweeted about it. He clearly felt that he had been libeled by her. And I think it's very insightful. Emily Maitlis absolutely represents very left-wing media, right? She's part of that. She's part of that whole elite media establishment who likes to act as if they're like down with the people and everything. Couldn't be further from it. These are the kind of people who have, kitchen suppers in their North London homes of an evening with other media darlings. Very much part of a lovey crowd. But what she showed us quite clearly is that she and people like her in media believe that anybody who raises awareness around the so-called grooming gang issues are racist, or their motivation is racist, or in the case of Rupert Lowe, that it's about raising money. Now, a perfect example of how that it couldn't be more wrong is Raja Mia, who is part of Rupert Lowe's inquiry, and he's not even being paid for it. He said that on the show the other week. Right. So I thought this was an egregious interview, and I thought it was very insightful. It really told us a great deal what people like Emily Maitlis and her type think about the whole issue of grooming gangs. And it's very unsavory. Look at her body language, speaks volumes, says Daryl. And yes, Kenneth, absolutely, by their own words, condemned. Look her eyes, says SMG. Christine said that picture doesn't look like her, as she had work done. That picture is taken from a moving still. But the thing about Emily Maitlis, of course, obviously she's always permatanned. It's not my business if people want to be permatanned. But with Emily Maitlis, it was always a bit like kind of over egging the pudding, if you know what I mean. She is a female James O'Brien. That is a fair comment. That is a fair comment. James O'Brien is basically the male Emily Maitlis. That's brilliant. I will never forget it. He's doing the hand sign, says Natasha. And she's just insane. Did anybody ever see when it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Didn't she tell her to F off? I think she did. I'm pretty sure she did. I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene. You should find that video. It's funny. Funny. Anyway, I think he should take some kind of action against her, if only to get her to, reevaluate what she said, because it was extremely insightful. Her line of questioning was frankly disgusting. The fact that she attempted to, essentially villainize people who are raising awareness around this issue tells us rather a lot. And actually, well done, Rupert Lowe, for dealing with it. As I say, Rupert Lowe and I would probably, again, like me and Lucy Connolly, not have a great deal in common. But I do agree with, I think he's really trying to do the best on this grooming gang situation, because clearly the government aren't going to do it. And I think what he's attempted to do by setting this up was force their hand, which we know is not going to happen. They're not up for that sort of thing, are they? They're awful people. Good news, though. I see that the Ledbetter bill is losing support. The Ledbetter bill, of course, is about assisted dying. It ran out of time on Friday. It's back for debate in June. They're now saying that no one would be forced to help with the process of assisted dying against their wishes in terms of health staff. Let me just bring up a picture. We're having to talk about a lot of deplorable people today, kids. It's not good for my heart. Kim Ledbetter, I find particularly deplorable the way that she is pushing this through. She, of course, is pretty much only famous because her sister was a MP and killed, and then Kim Ledbetter became an MP on the back of that. That was a pity vote. It was a pity vote. She's a deeply unpleasant individual. She was given this job. Her family are important to the whole Labour project. On the day that she came into Parliament, in fact, the new term when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, it was her family, the Ledbetters, who were invited to Parliament. And isn't that interesting? I think it's very interesting how influential this northern family seem to have over the Prime Minister of the UK. Gosh, how many more people have influence over the Prime Minister of the UK, I wonder? Interesting comments going on there, and I have to agree with Claire. Actually, I'm not going to read it, but I agree with you, Claire. I do. And obviously the whole idea about the assisted dying is it's a bill which would allow terminally ill adults in England and Wales is expected to die within 6 months to seek help to end their own life. And it is currently being considered through Parliament, but it's losing support. Some of the MPs who were on side before, they're losing them. The original bill stated that no registered medical practitioner or other health professional would be under any obligation to participate in the process of assisted dying, and they could not be discriminated by their employer if they did not wish to do so. Well, that's still back on the table. Thank you, Natasha, for the super chat. You're a star. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's still back on the table. But the reality is that there are a number of MPs, including Peter Lamb, Labour, who originally voted yes for this. He's now going to be voting no. But of course, you know who is still pushing for this, right? Esther bloody Ranson and her daughter. Esther Ranson, former BBC employer. Lots to be said about Esther Ranson, but not least, she has cancer. And she, of course, has been pleading for this assisted dying bill to go through. But I think if there's an argument about why the assisted dying bill should be stopped right now, is the fact that Esther Ranson is still alive. She's been going on about how she's dying for the last year, right? So that, I think she's actually a great example of why we need to get rid of the assisted dying bill, because oftentimes people live longer than we suspect they might. Right. So she's a perfect example of it. But her and her whiny daughter, Rebecca, they've been pleading, absolutely pleading. Rebecca says, has pleaded to MPs to give her mother peace of mind. And, you know, how outrageous. Is this all about Esther Ranson? Esther Ranson, to me, is like, I don't know, David Attenborough, a BBC asset where I think rather more will be said about them once they've passed than can be said about them while they are still here. That's kind of my take on it. Can't bear her. I can't. Do you know what? Can I bear anybody I'm talking about today? Struggling here, peeps. Struggling. Benny said, Sonia, do you support Tommy? Do you mean Tommy Robinson? Tommy Robinson and I, again, would be at odds in many regards. But I think that we should also, and I do acknowledge, I don't support him being a Zionist, right? Don't support that. And don't know where he is on that currently, but he certainly was. But what I do support is that he was somebody who stood up to be counted on the grooming gangs issue. I can do those kind of isolations. I can acknowledge, like I did with Ben and Jerry earlier, as one example. I can acknowledge when somebody does good, even if I don't necessarily agree with their position or where they're coming from, right? So and there's very few people I actually support, to be frank with you, especially in the public domain, because a lot of people are there because they've been put there. Although I do actually think that Tommy Robinson is, and he has his critics, and certainly in my chat, trust me about that, he has a lot of critics in my chat. But I do think that out of all the kind of public figures, he's probably one that is closest to people like genuinely supporting him. Like people out on the streets genuinely supporting him. They see him as one of theirs. I don't agree with him being in solitary confinement. And I think that he has been treated in a way that makes it clear that he is a political prisoner. So does that answer your question? We should support ideas, not people. John, there you go. There you go. Excuse me, throat. Sunday Times Rich List came out. 37th annual list reveals who are the 350 richest individuals and families in the UK based on their wealth, including land, property, and other assets. Want to have a guess who's super, super, super rich? Super rich. King Charles, of course. King Charles. He's now worth twice as much as his late mother, Queen Elizabeth. King Charles' personal fortune has increased by 30 million to 640 million in the past year. See, here's the thing. King Charles, so we're told, has cancer and has literally not done anything except, ascend to the role of king. And yet his personal fortune has increased exponentially. And bear in mind that Charles handed over properties to William, which were so poor that we can actually legitimately call both King Charles and his heir slum landlords. They're slum landlords. The people who were renting from their properties had just awful. It was awful. There was problems with mold and damp. Children. It was unsafe for children to live in their properties. So Charles and William are both slum landlords. But don't worry, because they're super, super rich. Right, they're super, super rich. He's now Charles has succeeded, who came to the throne, obviously 2022, ranks joint 238th in the list. He's up 20 places from 2024. And it's interesting. There's an organisation, right, called Members of the Patriotic Millionaires. Are you familiar with them? So they're millionaires who have called on the government to properly tax rich people, I mean, I think it's interesting. I know there's lots of question marks over the fact that there is a group of millionaires who are calling for proper taxation of rich people. But I don't know. Miss Davis, who is a member of Patriotic Millionaires, said our media and political leaders need to stop focusing on the interests and habits of a small number of people who are hoarding extreme wealth at the expense of us all, and instead prioritize the interests of Britain's true wealth creators, our ordinary hardworking families, small businesses, entrepreneurs, teachers, health, and other public sector workers. These people are the backbone of the British economy, many of whom haven't seen a pay rise in 15 years. Our government should treat the rich list as the smelling salt it needs. Wake up and tax the super rich. Tax the super rich. Slum landlords, yes. And a letter from a viewer. Hello, Lindsay. How are you? What is happening in Glastonbury? And why has it, according to some sources, gone over to the dark side? Glastonbury, of course, is in England. It's the home of, was once considered the home of kind of like deep spirituality in the UK, but it would appear that something rather untoward has been taking place at Glastonbury Council recently when it comes to telling the truth. Viewer Lindsay wrote in and she said, "Hi, Sonia. Sandy Adams has recently been banned from holding events in Glastonbury assembly rooms by the council on very flimsy grounds, which is basically an attack on free speech in general by a supposedly liberal council in Glastonbury, which to some would be hard to believe." And just an aside, dear viewers, Sandy, of course, has been with us before. She's brilliant. She is completely up on WEF and stakeholder capitalism. She's a truth seeker. But back to Lindsay's email, Glastonbury as a whole has been infiltrated by a quite dark element intent on destroying the individuality of the town and turning the entire area into a World Heritage Site. This would entail the dumbing down of several spiritually thin places, the between the veil, right, between worlds, into mere tourist attractions. And I believe a wholesale takeover similar to what happened at Stonehenge, where they turned it into a tourist attraction. The vast majority of the population are against it, but I am fairly sure that the council are under instructions to push it through. There is a whole bigger picture to what is happening in Glastonbury, and Sandy is a beacon of light in an increasingly dark agenda. Anyway, I thought that she said, I know you'll get hundreds of similar suggestions, but just thought I would add mine to the mix. And I think it's a fair one because a lot of people talk about Glastonbury. Anyway, just to say they have now been rerouted and they will be holding an event in Glastonbury with Sandy and with, I believe, Clive de Carle and Richard Vobes on Friday, the 4th of July now. And it now represents, the organizer, Roseanne said, it now represents freedom of speech, return to Glastonbury. So please come along and support. Apparently what happened was that the council had cancelled the previous event, but they've now got a new venue, which is welcoming. And we welcome freedom of speech in Glastonbury, in the UK and across the world, says Roseanne, who's organising. And so say all of us, frankly. What's inside that tour, says Patty. What a question. What a question. Glastonbury is part of the establishment nowadays. Stephen, it is. I mean, that's a reality, just like Stonehenge is. That is absolutely the reality. And what else do I want to bring you on to? Oh, yeah. Okay. A brief Diddy update. Of course, they'll be starting week 2 in the courts today. First week in court, lots of revelations. Cassie, his former girlfriend, who was said to be the star witness, she sort of appeared for the first week. And there are obstacles because evidence appeared to show that she was very much involved in these things that they call freakos, which were essentially kind of like orgies in which he's accused of being a trafficker, of prostitution, of prostituting people, of gun charges, all manner of things. And certainly some of the texts from Cassie absolutely appeared to show that she was totally up for it, that she was actually partly a driving force. Now, I am neither here to support her or not, but first of all, to say this is just the start of the case. And I don't think for 1 second that the prosecution haven't thought this through. There are going to be other witnesses. And I think what they will probably do is they will support what Cassie has had to say. I think Cassie laid it out. Cassie had become the most famous. She was obviously given a payoff in a civil lawsuit when she sued Combs. But the problem is, and people don't necessarily understand this, and that is when you are in part of a kind of like an abuse partnership, you will agree to do all manner of things. I mean, that is an actual known fact. And a lot of the people who are saying, oh, that's it. You see actual videos, right, that are out there saying, oh, no, he's going to walk. How can they have assessed this after the first week of evidence? It doesn't look good. It looks like it's a lover's tiff with domestic violence. It doesn't look like what the prosecution are claiming. But as I say, this is very early in the evidence. And there are some people who are going to be coming through, I think, who are going to shock people. Like one of them is going to be Adria English. And I have to quote Short Order Cook. I agree with that. Cassie is still under his spell. That partnership was toxic. It 100% was. And I think you will agree, Short Order, that when people are in toxic situations with people who are very powerful and self-possessed, such as Sean Combs is, and I speak from firsthand experience, having met him at least twice and once on a one-to-one in his house or in his flat, in his apartment. So he's very powerful, and I should have imagined that because he was like, a couple of decades older than Cassie, really, when they got together, almost. And she was in awe of him. She wanted to be famous. And people don't understand how psychological abuse impacts people and makes you behave in a certain way. And when I was reading those texts, I wasn't necessarily automatically going, oh, she was part of it. I was actually going, oh, she's saying this to please him, to be his, top girl, because he made it clear to her that she wasn't the only one. And so that's how I read it. And I read it like that because I have understanding and experience about violence and toxicity in relationships. But there are other people who are likely to be coming up that will be problematic, such as Dawn Richards. Dawn Richards was part of the band that he formed, Danity Kane. She's already sued him, and she claims that she witnessed him beating up Cassie. And she's also accused him of sexual assault, harassment, and inhumane treatment, alleging that he groped her, that he caressed her, that he grabbed her without consent, that he falsely imprisoned her, that he forced her to remain at his various residences while depriving her and her bandmates of basic needs such as adequate food and sleep. It's very serious, obviously. But there's more that's going to come out of this. And it does appear highly likely and increasingly likely that there will be an appearance from Daphne Joy. You might not know who Daphne Joy is. Daphne Joy has a child with 50 Cent. And Daphne Joy is somebody who has been around rappers for a very, very long time. Lots of things have been said about Daphne Joy. Most of them I'm not going to repeat because they may well be defamatory. But nonetheless, it might explain in part why 50 Cent absolutely loathes Diddy, because there is certainly some evidence to suggest that Daphne Joy was around Diddy, and it may well be that she is testifying. And thank you so much, Kurz. Thank you. I very much appreciate that super chat. You are a star. Thank you. So I think that's really interesting. Obviously, Gene Deal, former Puffy Security, is singing like a bird at this moment in time, saying all manner of stuff, including about Diddy's mum The infamous video, of course, surfaced again. I played that a while ago of Diddy and his mum. There was this whole idea that after these so-called freak-offs, they lasted so long, people had to have IV drips. And I think the video that I played you recently was of Diddy and his mum both on IV drips, thus suggesting to the viewer that perhaps she had been somehow involved. And the conversation between them was very, very odd for a mother and daughter. They talked about how they went to strip clubs together, how even though the mum is the age that she is, I think she's now 85, although you'd never know it. She looks like a gangster mole. And she looks much, much younger for her age. And, you know, they kind of kiss each other on the lips. And he talked about how his mum is still out there and she's still doing her thing and everything. And it just felt completely untoward and just nasty. Intuition said it's all a stage show, And yes, I saw the longer video as well. Synchronized Soul of Diddy and Cassie is horrific. Yes, Del, absolutely. The white nails. Diddy says, right, and she's freshly dipped, right? And his mum is there with the white nails. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. I hope that I'm still taking care of my appearance at the age of 85, if I'm still around and everything. But I do think it's odd when I see a grown son talking about going to a strip club with his mum. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe I'm weird to find that odd. Who knows? I would, let's move on from that. We have a lot of animal lovers who watch this show. And in fact, I was contacted by one lady who is something of a kind of like animal medium. I'm going to bring her on the show. I must respond to her because I was a bit uncertain. Well, not least because I don't know how anybody's going to respond. But that would never really stop me. But also, I was a bit concerned about myself that it may trigger things in me regarding my dog. And just say, sad to say, my brother and my sister-in-law's dog had to be put down on Friday. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. Even when it's not your dog, once you've got to know a dog, it's heartbreaking, right? It hurts your heart. It's really heartbreaking. So I want to talk about animals. And thank you, Bridget. Bridget wrote in. And Bridget said, you may be interested in this. I can't find any information regarding the care of these animals. It would seem that still, as of today, their fate is undecided. And Bridget is talking about orca whales. 2 orca whales and a dozen dolphins have been left trapped in an abandoned marine park in France for 4 months. Right. Unfortunately, I am forced to show you the video because sometimes we just have to face horrible, painful truths. And this is one of them. And I'm going to show it. Please look away now if it's too much for you. But I think that we need to ram this point home. There they are. This footage was taken on May the 7th. Marine land closed to visitors in January 2025. It's now abandoned. And what this is, obviously, it's drone footage. It was released by animal activist group Tidebreakers. And it shows orcas, Waiki and her 11-year-old son, Kijo, swimming aimlessly in the deserted marine land, which is near Cannes in France. It closed on January the 5th. And the footage, whether you can see or not, it also reveals that the whole place is kind of like algae infested. That's where the park's remaining dolphins are confined. And there you go. You got it there. And the French authorities have yet to find a suitable site in Europe for the orcas. And the problem is these poor creatures have all been raised in captivity. So it's not even as easy as just releasing them back into the ocean. They probably wouldn't survive. And time is indeed running out. What can we do? I don't know. Other than, for me, all I can do is talk about it on here and hope that something takes place. It is so sad, so sad. What kind of subhuman did this? I have to say, these days, I hate any kind of that sort of animal captivity for human entertainment. I really do. I mean, some people would say that they have problems with like dogs and cats being in captive, but I've had cats and dogs all my life. And if there was a problem with them being in captivity, believe me when I say all of them became part of the family and never acted as if they had a problem. And in fact, one of our cats got lost and was lost for 2 weeks and still returned home. So there was, I mean, and you could say that animals been programmed, but it's completely different to what's happening with these creatures, these orcas and these dolphins. And Bridget was absolutely distressed, absolutely, and said, you know, really, these people don't seem to care. But I think that it's starting to make a sizable noise. So all we can all do is just keep contributing to it, right? Share it, make the noises be known. What is Macron doing about it? And actually, Bridget raised a good point. She said, where is Bridget Bardot? Doesn't she have an animal rights organization? Is Bridget Bardot still with us? Because she did. Obviously, she became a huge animal rights campaigner. But I find that really painful. Money over life. That is the reality right there. Karma said, mine, our house. I tell them they are too posh. Posh kitties. We love it, don't we? We love it. And what else do I want to talk to you about? Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, for sending in your image yesterday morning. Just wanted to show you my sky this morning. Let's have a little blast of that, shall we? Just want to show you my sky this morning, says Jenny. Let's have a look, Jenny. Let's have a look at your sky. This was yesterday morning. And you can see on the second line, the plane mid-flow of spraying. Yeah, that's that thing coming down, right? That's weird. That I don't know if I've actually seen one like that. Oh, no, I know what you mean. Jenny, I can see it. But what is that other line coming down? I'm pointing at the screen like everybody should see what I'm pointing at. So look from the top, people. There's the big, thick one. Then in the middle, there's a line within that line. Is that what you're talking about, Jenny? Didn't one of the Saudi kings just create a new animal park for billions? Short order cook. Somebody write to him. Been cloudy on and off since Saturday. Drumstick, you're absolutely right. You can't see my cursor. I'm sorry. Mad said it's a jet. They do grids up there. Cloudy as anything. Fake all the way, says Teresa. Anyway, lovely Jane, who regularly writes into the show, which is always lovely. Thank you, Jane. Contacted her MP. And her MP is James. Is it Nash or Naish? Naish. If it was just Nash, it wouldn't have the I. So it might be James Naish. But Jane said, the following question was recently answered in Parliament, which provides more context about recent announcements. And this is Jane's MP responding to her. And it says that Secretary of State has regular discussions with Aria on a range of matters. This is obviously to do with the whole kind of dimming of the sun and everything. As set out in framework agreement, Aria has unique operational freedoms, including over its research and project choice and its procedures. This independence allows Aria to take bold steps to better understand the world we live in, and the government supports Aria exploring critical areas like this. And the response goes on to say that the government is not in favour of using solar radiation modification, and talks about how the advanced research, which is ARIA, by the way, the Advanced Research and Inventions Agency, is exploring climate cooling programs backed by 56.8 million, has been designed to build an evidence base which will enable scientists to better understand. But the MP goes on to say, given the scale of our climate challenges, I think it's appropriate that we set out clear policies, regulations, and funding streams to decarbonise power, transport, buildings, industry, and agriculture at the pace. I firmly believe that bold, fair action now will save us money in the long run, create high-quality jobs, and safeguard our children's future, but recognise the need to engage people as part of this journey. To that end, as I have demonstrated and said to you before, so Jane's clearly been in touch with him before, I will continue to monitor this issue and will, of course, make people aware if this activity is taking place on any significant scale locally. Now, the detail, the devil is in the detail here, right? The man is not admitting to what is taking place. And he says that if it's on any significant scale, what does that mean? His significance might be different to my significance, but there's a denial that this is currently taking place, right? And that is the reality, is that it is taking place, it's been taking place for an awful long time. And I loathe and detest the gaslighting. When they did, the mainstream headlines the other week about sun dimming, we all know it's been going on for an awful long time. It's a lie. And the gaslighting is absolutely inappropriate. But what I thought was absolutely great thank you, Jane, for sending this in, is we now have Mr. James Naish down. We now know his position, and that is he's essentially denying that it's already taken place, but he will notify his constituent if anything significant happens, right? Teresa wants to know how they say this. I don't know. They don't want to fess up, Vape King. No, they don't. Depopulation is the plan, says Mike. I hear you. I absolutely hear you. Right. I am coming very soon to a close. I think there's some stuff that I missed out earlier, which I need to go back to. Want to make sure that I've got everything that I had on my table. But yet my throat is struggling today, people, a little bit. But that's all right. I will intend to be back on Wednesday. But obviously, as ever, thank you, you wonderful, wonderful donators. You are absolute stars. Where would I be without you? We are coming very, very close to our first year as Wake Up at the end of this month. And that's really exciting for me that we've essentially managed to do this for a year. I've managed to solely dedicate myself to Wake Up, which feels wonderful. And I would not be able to do that without glorious, wonderful people supporting me and what I do around here. And I love you and I thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. What's that? What are you saying there? Benny said dolphins and orcas need that human interaction. They love it. Paul says this is the eugenesis in your face, depopulation strategy. M says it's shite skies over knots. It started off so well with blue skies and sun. Now it is meh clouds. Thank you, Kath. Thank you all. Oh, Armand and Shug, they crack me up, right? They often leave messages like the day before. And when I'm like setting up, I can see those initial messages and then they disappear. I do not get rid of them. Somebody else does. Well, something else happens. I don't know whether it goes into the next day that the comments disappear. I don't know what happens, but these two are so funny. And almost nobody beats Shug as being the first person to comment on the live stream. But Armand gives it a good shot. Thank you, Jean. I'm giving my best shot here, best shot. But I want to just talk before we go about perfect timing. Perfect timing is important. Yeah, Lisa, a year. Absolutely. Such a fantastic bunch of followers. You're right. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. And the thing I hope that I've fostered around here is that we are entitled to have difference of opinion. What we're not entitled to do is abuse each other, or as that cretin did at the start of the show, attempt to drag my family into my political views. I'm not having that. Don't do that. It's generally accepted on the internet that we leave families out of it, right? So that is not free speech. That is trying to abuse me because that person was probably a filthy Zionist who probably sits at home and probably pleasures themselves over the idea of genocide. That's what that person is about, right? Don't know who that person is. They're under a fake name. I haven't defamed them. Right. Absolutely. Congratulations for a year. Woohoo! Yes, Natasha said, in a world where we can be anything, please be kind. That's the one to follow. Sometimes, though, it's important not to be kind. And the reason I say that, Natasha, is certainly females are absolutely raised to be kind. And that can put us, as we've discovered over the whole kind of transgender scenario, that puts us in a terrible situation because women were then frightened to raise their voices because it was unkind to say, no, I don't want a man in the women's lab and all that kind of stuff. But I take your point. I do take your point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Be kind, but be discerning. Is that fair enough? Perfect timing. I want to talk about perfect timing. I think we've established that I have a fair amount of enemies, right? Because of the work I do. And I don't have a problem with that at all. But about 2 months ago, I came into information that I could use, like serious hardcore information that I could use against people, about certain people, right? And I could have made them a public laughing stock. I could have armed other enemies that they have. But the thing is, I decided not to. And I decided not to because late in life, I've come to understand about perfect timing. And the bottom line is this: the information that I came into, the perfect timing of it is not yet here. But when it is, it will wreak maximum havoc on those involved. And it made me think about the importance of perfect timing. Right? I take no joy, by the way, in this whole idea, but I consider karma, and I consider that God is kindly allowing me to have certain information and kindly allowing me to watch, which brings me to perfect timing. And oftentimes people, when they're attempting something, they get frustrated, they feel that they're getting nowhere, they give up. But perfect timing refers to doing something or having something happen at the ideal or most advantageous time, what I'm absolutely referring to. And believe me, when I'm ready to release that information, the whole world will know about it, right? And I'm not withholding any information that harms the world not knowing either. You get my point? It's just information that will wreak maximum damage on those who need maximum damage wrought on them. That's my point. And it's perfect timing. And some people talk about perfect timing in the context of religion. And this whole idea that, you know, God's timing is always perfect. And I think that there's some truth in that, because it's been my experience that sometimes when I've attempted to do things in my life, the stars, the universe is just not aligning, and I've not been able to do it. And so I've had to come back at it again. And actually, this breakfast show is a perfect example of that. I was involved in creating a breakfast show in 2020 on a platform. And there were lots of problems with it. Some mornings when I would rock, you don't know about these things, right? But sometimes when I would rock up to do the show, I couldn't get connected. There were always problems. There were often problems with the platform, connection problems. And it was just such an endless headache. And sometimes I would literally start the show on the verge of tears because it was just such a shite show in so many respects. But I wasn't ready. Obviously, I wasn't ready to do my big thing then. I wasn't ready to go alone then, but I am now and have been for the last year, which is why this is proceeding the way it is. And we are getting an increase in viewership on pretty much on every platform, week on week. And people who have never heard of me before, they write to me and they've discovered Wake Up, and that's all down to perfect timing. And some people actually believe absolutely that true success in an area that is important to you is not a matter of luck. I don't believe in luck. I believe that luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? This whole idea that you're just going to be lucky, I think is rubbish, and it fails to acknowledge the work that people put into a moment. This whole idea, overnight success, some people say takes 15 years, right? When you suddenly hear of somebody, chances are they've been around for an awful long time, much longer than you think they have been. And it's just because, and this is my belief, that finally the universe is lining up to grant the person what it is that they most desire. And, you know, the thing is neither should you be waiting for the right time to do something either, because all the preparation counts. When I created that first breakfast show, that enabled me to understand how to work this breakfast show, right? Yes, lenticular. Yes, you can create your own luck. Be cheeky. Stephen says TNT doesn't exist now, I believe. Yeah, I wasn't talking about TNT. TNT was another perfect example. I went to TNT. I was hired to be their breakfast show presenter. And then they started to censor me, including about chemtrails, which even legacy media have now been forced to admit exist, right? And so that was another perfect example. But each of those, and TNT was a bit of a shite show as well. There were lots of issues going on behind the scenes as well there, which I've already revealed in a video that I did. But the point being is perfect timing is Wake Up, not anything that preceded it. Nothing that preceded it. Wake Up is my perfect timing. And it's a whole lot of preparation. And actually, one of the reasons that I thought about this also was somebody wrote to me the other week, I haven't spoken to you for years, and they said, how lucky that you thought to do Wake Up when you did. No. Timing is everything. Timing is literally everything. And I believe that Wake Up is an idea whose time has come. And I love having you people here with us. I really do. And it's wonderful. Thank you, Natasha. And thank you all. Everything else was just learning for today. Craffles, it was everything. And even that first experience that I talked about, I felt great loyalty towards the platform. I really did. And I wanted it to succeed, but it wasn't right. It was never supposed to. And it's, you know, my show on that platform was never supposed to go where I wanted it to go, because I wasn't supposed to be working for other people. I was supposed to be working for myself, and then I was being paid to produce a show for other people. But now this is about me. And people say, I love this quote, the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. And so I say this, and I talk about perfect timing, because if you are in the middle of something and you just had enough, you don't feel, whatever it is, whether it is a project, whether it, whatever, a creation, something, writing, anything, or whether it's a relationship, if it feels that there's still more life to it, keep going. Don't be a dead horse, though, of course, because sometimes things aren't working because they're not supposed to work, but you yourself will know. This is where people have to be so much in touch with their own instinct, who they are, and not listen to other people. And my advice for you is, if you're in the middle of a project and you're uncertain about it, shut out all outside voices. Sorry, I've got a real floppy piece of hair today. Shut out all outside voices, right? The only person who counts is you. You will not be on your deathbed saying, I wish I'd have listened to Tom, Dick, and Harry. You won't. People aren't, right? They often say, I wish I'd have spent more time with my loved ones, or I wish I'd have followed my own intuition, my own instinct, and done what was right for me, right? So I just want to talk about perfect timing. I think it's so important, and I love it. And thank you, Teresa. And it just reminded me, because I've, at times my life can be quite turbulent because of the work I do, but it's absolutely wonderful when you realize that everything has its time and place. And so don't lose patience. I really want to convey that to you. Don't lose patience in neither yourself or what you're doing. If it's got legs, you'll know. You absolutely will. And because I want to end on this quote, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And first of all, I just want to say thank you all. You're wonderful. You're absolutely lovely. And I can see they're having a little argument. I think it's the same two always argue, don't they? Isn't it the same two that always argue? I could be wrong there. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan has called me the goat. You know what goat means, right? Grace of all time. Yes. Thank you. I love that. Thank you, Colin. You're wonderful. And I love you all. Thank you. You're great people. Thank you for being here in the chat. Thank you as ever. Join me on Wednesday. I'm going to go and soothe my voice now. You're amazing people. Thank you for the super chats. And I want to end on a quote. And this really is my point. And it is, you don't have to swing hard to hit a home run. If you got the timing, it'll go. Have a wonderful, wonderful Monday. I love you lots. Thank you for being here. Take excellent care of yourself. And I will see you on Wednesday. See you Wednesday, folks. Have a great time. Be kind to each other. Be kind to yourself.